If you're going to pass out in a biohazard zone, at least do it away from the bleach. The voice was calm, steady, almost annoyed. It didn't match the chaos around it. The high-pitched alarm shrieking from the carbon monoxide sensor, the hissing of a leaky pressure valve, and the crumpled body of a young intern slumped beside a toppled cleaning cart. Jonas Hale knelt beside the man without hesitation, ignoring the chemical fumes that burned his nostrils. His janitor badge hung from his chest, but everything about his posture screamed something else. Something trained, precise, controlled. With one hand, Jonas checked the intern's pulse. Weak, rapid. With the other, he reached for the oxygen mask mounted on the emergency wall unit, slipping it on the man's face with practiced ease. "You're not dying today, kid," he muttered, then added under his breath, "Not on my shift." By the time security arrived, frantic and disoriented, Jonas had already shut off the valve, cracked a window, and stabilized the intern's breathing. The kid would be fine, but no one thanked him. They ushered the young man out on a stretcher, barely glancing at the janitor who had saved him. Jonas stood silently, watching the flashing ambulance lights from the loading dock, the bitter night, air tugging at the edges of his worn blue uniform. Somewhere behind him, a voice sliced through the hum of sirens like a scalpel. "Is this what you call productivity, meddling in medical emergencies you're not qualified to handle?" Jonas didn't turn. He didn't need to. That voice was unmistakable, cool, razored, and expensive. Avery Blake, CEO of Blake Corp., age 40, billionaire, brilliant, brutal. He finally looked over his shoulder. She stood there, immaculate in a tailored navy suit, heels sharp enough to pierce concrete. Her arms were crossed, her gaze cold as surgical steel. "There was a gas leak," Jonas said evenly. "Your intern would have been dead before the paramedics arrived." Avery's eyes narrowed. "You're a janitor, Mr. Hale." "Jonas Hale, Mr. Hale," she repeated slowly, like tasting something sour. "You're not a doctor. You have one job here and it doesn't include medical heroics. Stick to cleaning floors." Jonas held her gaze unflinching. Someone had to care enough to act. That landed. For just a flicker of a second, something unreadable passed through her expression. Fatigue, maybe, or guilt. Then it vanished behind the armor of her power suit. She turned on her heel and disappeared into the glass building. Her reflection fractured a dozen times across the steel and light. He waited until she was gone before letting out a long breath, not from fear, from restraint. He had seen it, the tremor in her left hand as she pushed open the door, the micro-hesitation in her gait, the way she blinked one too many times under the flicker of fluorescent light. Things no one else would catch. But Jonas Hale did because Jonas Hale used to be someone else, and his trained eyes, no matter how many toilets he scrubbed or trash bags he hauled, had never stopped seeing. 2 hours later, Jonas sat in the basement janitor's lounge, eating a cold sandwich and listening to the quiet breathing of the only other occupant in the room, his 10-year-old daughter, Lena. She was curled on the old recliner, fast asleep, still wearing her headphones. A doe-geared library book rested on her chest. Women Who Changed the World. He smiled faintly. She insisted on waiting up for him during his late shifts, especially when her nightmares came back. The fire, the hospital, the night everything burned down. Jonas stared at the flickering vending machine light. The same signs Avery Blake was showing now. He'd seen them before too many times, too late once, and that once had cost him everything, Daddy. Her voice pulled him from the storm of his thoughts. "Yes, sweetheart, you're thinking too loud again." Jonas chuckled softly, walked over and knelt beside her. "Sorry, did something happen tonight?" He hesitated. "Just work stuff." She looked at him the way only children do, piercingly honest. "Did someone forget how important you are again?" That stopped him. Lena had a way of putting things that always made him feel both proud and shattered. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Maybe," he said, "but we don't need them. To remember, right?" "Nope," she whispered, leaning into his hand. "Because I remember, and I'm not forgetting." Hours later, as Jonas pushed his mop across the marble floors of the executive wing, he passed by the floor-to-ceiling glass of the top-level boardroom. Avery was still inside, alone, her laptop glowing cold blue in the darkness. She was on a call, pacing. Her hand went to her temple briefly, then her jaw clenched. She stopped mid-sentence. For a moment, it looked like she didn't know where she was. Then she shook it off and raised her voice to whoever was on the other end. Jonas watched her from the shadows unseen. That hesitation, that confusion, it was getting worse. He turned away, jaw tight, gripping the mop like a lifeline. Jonas Hale had promised himself he would never get involved again. Never diagnose, never treat, never try to save anyone who didn't ask to be saved. But what if no one else was looking? What if everyone else chose not to see? And what if next time she staggered, it wouldn't be in the safety of a locked boardroom? As he returned to his cart, Jonas pulled a notepad from his pocket. In the clean clinical handwriting of someone who'd once signed prescriptions instead of cleaning supply forms, he began to write. Patient Avery Blake, Observation 1, momentary disorientation, visual stammering. Observation 2, left-hand tremor, intermittent observation. 3, phototubia, increased sensitivity to light. Preliminary hypothesis, possible neurological disorder, progressive, possibly fatal if untreated. Action monitor, document, do not intervene yet. He tucked the note away, then returned to scrubbing the floor. From a distance, he looked like any other janitor, quiet and visible. But what no one knew was that beneath the uniform behind the silence, Jonas Hale had just begun a mission, not to prove anything, not for revenge, but because when he looked at Avery Blake, he didn't see a billionaire. He saw a life in danger, and saving lives was something he had never unlearned. The steam from the shower curled into the air like ghosts, soft, fleeting, and full of memory. Jonas Hale stood at the bathroom sink, a towel slung around his neck, staring at the face in the mirror. Same dark circles, same quiet eyes, same man who used to wear a white coat and save lives. Only now his hands smelled faintly of disinfectant and bleach, not antiseptic and iodine. He reached into the medicine cabinet and pulled out an old pill bottle empty. Not for him, for Ellie. She'd had trouble sleeping again. The fire haunted her less these days, but it still had a grip. Trauma doesn't disappear. It adapts like people. He moved quietly down the hall to her room. Lena lay curled up under her sunflower blanket, the soft glow of a nightlight washing her golden hair in amber. She was gripping her stuffed penguin, Dr. Beaker like it was her lifeline. Jonas smiled faintly. Dr. Beaker had survived just about everything. Fire, flood, a spilled milkshake incident that should have ended his career. And yet, like her father, the penguin endured. A soft knock on the door broke the silence. Not a real knock, just the sound of knuckles brushing wood. A code. Their code. "You awake, Bean?" he asked, pushing the door open. Lena stirred, blinking against the light. "Hi, Daddy." Jonas crouched beside her bed. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," she whispered. "I was thinking about Mom." He swallowed hard. "Yeah, she used to say the world's loudest people are usually the ones who need the most help." Jonas exhaled slowly. She did say that. She'd have helped the CEO lady, wouldn't she? There it was. Direct. Lena always had a sixth sense when it came to what he was holding back. Jonas sat on the edge of the bed, resting his elbows on his knees. "You saw her. She was yelling at you like you were invisible." Lena frowned. "But you weren't. I saw you. Everyone saw you." "Some people don't like being seen, sweetheart," Jonas said, "especially when they're hurting and pretending they're not. But that's when they need to be seen most." His breath caught. He looked down at her, this 10-year-old, with more clarity than most adults. Yeah, he said softly. That's exactly when. She reached for his hand, small fingers curling into his calloused palm. I wrote something, she said, suddenly shy. Oh, he smiled. Lena pulled a folded sheet of paper from under her pillow. It's for school, but it's really for you. He opened it, his heart already aching in anticipation. The title was written in purple ink across the top in shaky, determined letters. Reasons my dad is a hero. He didn't read it then. He couldn't. Not without falling apart. Instead, he hugged her tight. You should sleep now. Okay? She nodded against his chest. You're going to help her, aren't you? Jonas hesitated. I don't know. Promise me one thing. What? Don't stop seeing people. He kissed her forehead, and his voice cracked as he answered. Never been. I never will. The next night, back at Blake Corp., Jonas pushed his janitor's cart past the executive wing again. The lights were dim, the glass walls reflecting city light like a mosaic of broken stars. He paused. Inside, Avery. Blake stood alone, hands gripping the edge of the conference table like she was anchoring herself to the earth. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her breathing uneven. She didn't see him. Not yet. Jonas made a decision. He pulled out a blank sheet of paper from his notebook. The same notebook where he had logged every symptom in cold clinical detail and wrote a single sentence. Someone should check your cerebellum function before it checks out on its own. No name, no accusation, just a warning dressed as a whisper. He folded the note in thirds and slid it into the executive suggestion box labeled Wellness Feedback. It was anonymous by design, safe, deniable, but precise, just like him. 3 days passed. Nothing changed. No one came to him. No alarms were raised. Avery kept walking like a queen with a migraine, her armor impenetrable. Jonas kept cleaning, observing, noticing, always noticing, until Thursday night. Jonas was finishing the floor outside the CEO's office when he heard something faint but not forgettable. A soft thud, then silence. He pushed open the door without knocking. Avery Blake was on the floor, one hand clutching the edge of her desk, her other trembling uncontrollably. She looked up at him with pure fury. Get out. You're having a focal seizure, he said flatly. I said, I don't care what you said, you're not okay. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Jonas caught her before she hit the ground. Don't touch me, she hissed. You're lucky I'm here too, he shot back, lowering her into her office chair. I've seen this before. This isn't stress. It's neurological, possibly a mass, possibly progressive. If you wait much longer next time, you won't. Come out of it. She was shaking from rage, maybe. Or fear, or both. You're a janitor, she whispered, teeth clenched. Jonas looked her dead in the eye. Not always a beat. The room pulsed with silence. Call your doctor, he said, releasing his grip. Get an MRI now. Then he turned and walked out, leaving behind the chaos, the pride, and the woman who still thought power could protect her from mortality. That night, Jonas sat on the fire escape behind his apartment, with Lena curled beside him, under a blanket. The city buzzed below. The stars above were faint, but they were there. I did something tonight, he said. Lena looked up. Was it the right thing? I don't know yet. She thought about that, then nodded. Sometimes she said you do the right thing and people still hate you for it, but it's still right. Jonas stared out, at the skyline, heart aching with all the things he couldn't change. But one thing had shifted. He had seen the signs, and this time he hadn't stayed silent. This time, if the past came back, it wouldn't find him hiding. It would find him standing. Ready? You said Q3. Avery snapped, pacing the boardroom. We're already into Q4 and our numbers are still flatlining in neurology. That's not a forecast, James. That's a fantasy. The executives around the table shifted uncomfortably. Some glanced. at their tablets, pretending to review slides. Others simply looked down, praying not to be called on. Jonas watched from the glass hallway, mop in hand, the rhythmic sound of its strokes masked by the muffled tension inside. The boardroom was bathed in sterile LED light, all clean lines and polished veneer so perfect it almost disguised the chaos inside. Almost. He saw it again. The flicker. Avery's right hand twitched subtly as she gestured. Her voice, sharp as ever, began to blur just slightly around the edges. She closed her eyes for a second too long mid-sentence. Her fingers fumbled. The slide remote. No one noticed, or worse, they chose not to. Jonas clenched the handle of the mop tighter, jaw set. His training screamed through every cell, but his job, his reality, told him to keep walking. And so he did, until her voice followed him. Mr. Hale. He turned slowly. The boardroom door had swung open, and Avery Blake stood at the threshold, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like a hawk eyeing a threat. "You're dripping water near the glass," she said again. It wasn't true. Jonas had always been meticulous, too meticulous, but that wasn't the point. She wasn't correcting a mistake. She was reasserting control. He gave a quiet nod. "I'll recheck the area." "Do that." A few of the executives had glanced over now, watching, curious, smug. Jonas turned back toward his cart, but before he could take another step, Avery added loud enough for everyone to hear. "Next time, maybe stick to what you're paid to do." He stopped and slowly turned back around. "Of course," he said calmly. "And what is it I'm paid to do exactly?" The room fell still. Avery blinked, not because of the question, because of the momentary shift in power. It was small, but it cracked the surface. "To clean," she said coldly. Jonas nodded once. "Then it's a good thing I'm already cleaning up what others keep ignoring." The silence that followed hit harder than any insult. He didn't wait for a reply, just pushed his cart down the hallway and kept walking. Behind him, the boardroom door closed with a hiss of air like the final breath of a system slowly failing. That night, Jonas found Lena sitting at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of hot cocoa and reading one of her favorite books, The Mysterious Benedict Society. Her brows were furrowed in deep concentration lips, slightly parted in focus. "You're up late," he said, setting his bag down. She looked up, eyes curious. "How was work?" He hesitated, then gave her a wry smile. "Ever try explaining gravity to someone who insists the sky is holding them up?" She laughed, his favorite sound in the world. "Did you try diagrams?" Jonas chuckled, didn't get that far. Lena closed the book and leaned forward. "Dad, did you talk to her again?" He nodded slowly. "Not like last time, but yes." "Did she listen?" "No," he said. "Not really, but she heard something." Lena tilted her head. "That's a start." Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a sheet of lined paper slightly wrinkled and scribbled in purple ink. "What's that?" he asked. "My class is doing a memory capsule project," she said. "We have to write one letter to our future self." Jonas's eyebrows rose. "You're 10. "I'm very forward-thinking," she replied matter-of-factly, then slid the letter toward him. "But I wrote one to your future self, too." He looked at her, surprised. "My future self?" "Yeah." She smiled shilly. "Because sometimes you forget who you used to be, and I think you'll want a reminder." Jonas didn't open it. Not yet. He just placed a hand over hers and squeezed gently. "You're too wise for your own good." "No," she said, voice soft. "I just have the best teacher." The next morning, Avery stared at her own reflection in the executive washroom, gripping the sink with both hands. She looked tired, not the curated kind of tired like jet lag or long hours, but soul-deep exhaustion, the kind you can't apply concealer to. Her head ached. Her vision had fluttered again last night on the drive home, and for a terrifying second, she forgot where she was. The steering wheel had blurred. The exit signs meant nothing. She'd told no one. Not her assistant, not her doctor, not even James, who'd known her since their days as interns. Because what would they say? What would they do? She wasn't allowed to be fragile. Not when shareholders demanded stability, not when competitors circled like vultures, not when weakness meant war. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the faucet. Water rushed out, cold, unforgiving. She splashed her face and leaned back. That janitor's words echoed in her skull. It's a good thing I'm already cleaning up what others keep ignoring. He wasn't just being defiant, he was warning her, and that shook her more than she wanted to admit. Later that day, Avery sat in her office staring at her screen while her assistant read off appointments. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Her thoughts felt like static. Followed by a lunch meeting with the strategic board, her assistant was saying, and then the Neuroch Division status update at 2:30. Cancel the rest of my day, Avery interrupted. Her assistant blinked. Ma'am, Avery's tone sharpened. I said, cancel it. When the door closed behind her, Avery picked up the phone and stared at it. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. The number was still there, her neurologist. She didn't call. Instead, she opened her email. There it was. The anonymous wellness note. No name, no signature, just the words, someone should check your cerebellum function before it checks out on its own. A slow breath escaped her lips. She hit delete. But the message stayed, etched in the back of her mind like a diagnosis unspoken. At the end of the shift, Jonas closed his locker and picked up the folded letter Lena had written for his future self. He hadn't opened it all day. Now he did. It read, Dear future Dad, if you're reading this, I hope you remembered. You used to be someone amazing, and if you didn't, that's okay, because I still remember. And I think you're becoming someone even better. Love Ana Jonas stood in the hallway for a long time, the letter trembling in his hand. Some ghosts haunt you. Others remind you of who you still have time to be. And Jonas Hale knew in that moment that he wasn't done noticing. Not yet. The manila envelope sat on Jonas Hale's kitchen table like it had weight far greater than paper and ink. It wasn't thick, just 4 pages, but every word on those pages had been written with the precision of a scalpel and the restraint of a man who knew what it meant to speak truth in a world that punished honesty. He stared at it for a long time. Avery Blake's name was typed at the top of the first page. Not in bold, just clean, clinical, exact. It wasn't a diagnosis. Jonas, no. Longer had the license for that. It was an observation. 4 weeks of silent watching, motor instability, momentary aphasia, phototubia, subtle tremors, transient confusion. It wasn't speculation. It was evidence. Patterns, timelines, words she could not ignore unless she was actively choosing to. Jonas didn't want credit. He wanted her alive. He slid the envelope into a plain sleeve marked Employee Wellness Suggestion, Private, and addressed it anonymously to HR's internal inbox. He hesitated for only a second before dropping it into the outgoing mail slot. He hadn't signed it, but he had just lit a fuse. At Blake Corp's Human Resources office, Shannon from Compliance opened the envelope between sips of a lukewarm protein shake. Her eyes scanned the first paragraph, her brow rising as the language shifted from concern to neurological degeneration. By page 2, her face had gone pale. Christ, she whispered, and immediately buzzed her supervisor. Within an hour, the document was quietly escalated to the legal department. By day's end, it reached the desk of James Langley Blake Corpse, Chief Operating Officer and Avery's oldest confidant in the company. James read the report twice, lips pressed into a razor-thin line. Then he stood, walked to Avery's office, and knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. He finally cracked the door open, only to find her slumped back in her chair. One hand massaging her temple, the other grasping an untouched glass of water. Her laptop screen glowed with a paused video, some product pitch she clearly hadn't been watching. Avery James said softly, "Are you all right?" She startled, then recovered in a breath. "Fine," she muttered. "Just a headache." "You've had a lot of those lately." She looked at him, cold, calculating. "What do you want, James?" He walked in, shut the door, and held up the envelope. This was dropped in anonymously. "It's about you." Her face didn't change. Not at first, but the color in her cheeks drained almost imperceptibly. "I've read it," James said. "So, have 3 people in legal. We haven't logged it officially yet." "You think I'm a liability?" She said, her voice flat. "No," he replied. "I think you're sick." And someone noticed. Avery reached for the envelope, but James held it back. "Whoever wrote this," he continued, "they know what they're talking about. They've been documenting your symptoms with a level of precision I haven't seen since med school. I don't need this right now." "You do," he said, "or we risk everything. Not just your health, this company." Her hands tightened on the arms of her chair. "Do not threaten me with my own company." "I'm not threatening," James said quietly. "I'm reminding." Then he set the envelope gently on her desk and left. That night, Jonas scrubbed the marble floors of the executive hallway with more force than usual. He hadn't heard anything. No HR email, no knock on the storage room door. Nothing. He wasn't expecting praise, but silence was sometimes worse than scorn. As he rounded the corner, he caught sight of Avery's office door cracked open. Lights spilled out across the hallway, slanted and soft. She was inside alone facing the city skyline. Her back to him, one hand on the glass. He paused. She didn't move. Then, without turning, she spoke. "I read it." Jonas froze. "I don't know how you got those details," she said, "or why you care, but you crossed a line." He stepped into view slowly. "Would you rather I waited until your body crossed it first?" She turned, then, eyes sharp. "You don't get to lecture me." "I'm not lecturing," Jonas said. "I'm trying to keep someone from dying." She laughed once, hollow. "I have the best doctors in the country on my payroll. I've had 2 full physicals this quarter." "Then fire them," he said bluntly, "because they're not watching the right things." Avery stared at him, stunned by the audacity. "And you are?" "I used to," Jonas replied quietly. "Before everything I was got, wiped away." Her gaze faltered. "You're sick," he continued. "And I don't say that with judgment. I say that because someone has to, because the people who are paid to care clearly don't. And I can't not. You don't even know me. I know what fear looks like when it's dressed in pride." That hit harder than she expected. She looked away. "I'm not weak," she said. "No," he said. "You're terrified. There's a difference." A long silence settled between them, thick and pulsing. Finally, she whispered, "What did you used to be?" Jonas hesitated. "Then neurologist Stanford, 15 years in the ER and surgical units." Avery blinked. "Then why the hell are you mopping floors?" He looked down at his hands. "Because saving a patient cost me everything. My license, my reputation, my wife. All. Because I told the truth in a room full of people who couldn't handle it." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "I'm not trying to be a hero," Jonas said, voice softer now. "I just don't want to watch another person die because no one dared to say the obvious." For a long moment, Avery said nothing. Then slowly she sat down behind her desk. She looked tired. Not the curated kind, the real kind. She picked up the envelope again. "It says here, Potential cerebellar ataxia. That's a symptom, not a death sentence, Jonah said. If you act now. She looked at him, something new in her eyes. Not gratitude, not yet, but the smallest crack in the ice. You should go, she said quietly. He nodded. I will. As he turned to leave, she said almost too soft to hear. Thank you. Jonas didn't stop walking, but for the first time since he'd written that report, he allowed himself to breathe, not relief, readiness, because now that the door had opened, even a crack, it was only a matter of time before the truth rushed in. The sun was already low when Lena Hale pressed the tip of her purple pen to a blank sheet of notebook paper. Light filtered in through the apartment window, warming the tiny writing desk her father had salvaged from someone's curb years ago. She loved that desk. It was crooked, scratched, and made of solid oak like her father, unpolished, unshakable. Across the top of the page, she wrote to my future self, "Read this when you forget what brave looks like." She tapped the pen twice, thoughtful, then began writing slow and steady, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Jonas walked in quietly, setting down a paper bag filled with groceries. He paused when he saw her curled over the desk, brows furrowed, completely focused. The sight made something in his chest tighten, a mix of awe and guilt and gratitude. Working on homework? He asked. Sort of, she said, not looking up. It's for my capsule letter. He smiled. Future Lena, huh? Yeah, she replied. We're supposed to write something we think we'll need to hear again when we're older. Jonas walked over and ruffled her hair gently. Just don't write anything about boys. Future, you doesn't need that kind of stress. She laughed soft and clear and leaned into his arm. Don't worry. I'm writing about heroes. He paused. Superheroes. Numb. Real ones. Jonas didn't ask more. He didn't need to. He kissed the top of her head and moved to unpack the groceries, his mind still echoing with the words, real ones. At Blake Corp Avery, Blake sat in her office long after everyone else had gone home. The envelope from HR sat in her drawer, now buried under quarterly forecasts and a leather planner she hadn't opened in weeks. She hadn't called her doctor. Not yet. But she had reread the report 3 times. She saw it now. The patterns. The dizziness wasn't just stress. The tremors weren't just fatigue. And the man who noticed it all. The one in the janitor's uniform. He had looked at her like someone who knew exactly what he was seeing, and that terrified her more than the symptoms ever could. Because being sick was one thing. Being seen as weak, that was a different kind of death. Especially for someone like her. Her phone buzzed. A message from James Langley. Bohr wants a progress report on Neuroc. Friday. Don't postpone again. She stared at it for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Her hand hovered over her phone again. This time, she searched. Jonas Hale. The name wasn't in the employee directory. She typed it into the internet. Still nothing helpful. He had been erased by someone somehow. There were traces of a medical journal article 10 years back, co-authored by a Dr. J. Hale, but the link was dead. The system had buried him deep, and yet he had seen through her in seconds. 2 days later, Jonas stood in the hallway outside the executive floor, gripping his mop handle like a baton. He wasn't supposed to be there that day. It wasn't his floor. To clean. But something had pulled him upstairs, and he saw it the moment he arrived. Avery Blake, standing in the center of the boardroom, surrounded by 6 executives, James Langley among them. She held a tablet in one hand, but her other was clenched tightly behind her back, trembling. Jonas stayed in the shadows, watching. She started strong, confident tone, crisp data delivery, her usual verbal precision, but then something slipped. She paused mid-sentence, tried again, and failed. Jonas could see it. Her pupils dilated unevenly, a flicker of confusion in her expression. Her hand gripped the edge of the table for balance. James stepped forward. Avery. She blinked. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She looked at the screen in front of her like it was in another language. Jonas stepped closer to the door. Avery steadied herself, cleared her throat. "I'm fine," she said. The lie sharpened, forced. "Let's move on." But James wasn't convinced. His eyes lingered on her. Suspicion had bloomed. Jonas exhaled slowly. He had seen this moment before too many times. The moment when denial became dangerous. The moment right before the fall. He turned away. She wasn't ready yet, but she was close. That evening, Jonas sat with Lena on the fire escape again, the city humming beneath them like a living thing. She handed him a folded paper. "What's this?" he asked. "My capsule letter," she said, grinning. "I made an extra copy." Jonas unfolded it, expecting something light-hearted. Instead, what he read left him speechless. "Dear me, you're going to feel invisible sometimes. People will ignore you or tell you that you don't matter or treat you like your story doesn't count. But when that happens, I want you to remember Dad. Remember how he saw things no one else did. How he helped someone who didn't even like him. How he never stopped caring even when it hurt. Real heroes don't wear capes. They wear janitor uniforms and carry mops. They show up when nobody's watching. If you're ever lost, just be like him. Love me." But younger Jonas couldn't speak. His throat was tight and his eyes burned. "You're incredible," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "You are. I just pay attention." He pulled her close, the letter still shaking in his hand. In that moment, he realized something profound. He wasn't writing a report anymore. He wasn't just documenting symptoms. He was writing someone's second chance. And maybe, just maybe, his own. Back at Blake Corp, Avery stared at her own reflection again, but this time she didn't see a fortress of control. She saw the crack, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure she wanted to patch it. She wanted to understand it. She wanted to face it. She picked up her phone and called her neurologist, but the number went straight to voicemail. She hesitated, then scrolled through her recent calls until she reached one that wasn't there. Jonas Hale. She didn't have his number, but she knew exactly where to find him. And this time, she wouldn't be yelling. She'd be listening. The first thing Jonas noticed wasn't the sound. It was the stillness. The kind of eerie, too-quiet silence that made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He had just finished restocking disinfectants in the sublay storage when the building's usual hum, air vents, elevator chimes, distant office chatter suddenly stopped. That's when he heard it. A faint metallic clatter from the garage level. Then, a thud and nothing. Jonas didn't hesitate. He moved down the stairwell 2 at a time, keys jangling at his belt, flashlight already in hand. By the time he reached level B2, the motion sensor lights flickered on above him, washing the underground garage in a harsh, sterile glow. She was there, Avery. Blake, CEO of a billion-dollar empire, collapsed near her black Escalade. One heel twisted, beneath her one hand, limp at her side. Her breathing was shallow. Her eyes fluttered open, then squeezed shut as if the light itself was pain. Avery Jonas said, kneeling beside her. No honorifics, no hesitation, just urgency. Her lips parted. "Jonas." He froze only for a beat. She remembered his name. "Yeah, it's me," he said gently, taking her pulse. "Fast, weak, not good." "I don't know what happened," she murmured. "Yes, you do," he said softly. "You've known for weeks." She tried to sit up, but her body betrayed her, her muscles too weak, coordination failing. "Stop fighting it," Jonas said. "Let me help." "Don't make this a scene," she whispered, her voice cracked and dry. "You're already lying on the concrete of your own parking garage." I think the scene has arrived. He reached for his phone, dialing emergency. I don't want media, she mumbled. They won't find out from me. As he gave the dispatcher the details, his other hand never left her shoulder. When the call ended, he pulled off his jacket and folded it under her head. I should have listened, she said. You will, Jonas said. Starting now. They wheeled her into the ER under the alias Jane Doe executive. She'd insisted. No press, no alerts. She still thought she could outrun the vulnerability, but the MRI said otherwise. When the attending neurologist returned with the scans, his face said more than his words. Miss Blake, he said gently, we've identified a mass. Jonas stood quietly just outside the room, watching through the small square window in the door, as Avery absorbed the words that had changed so many lives before hers. Slow growing, but in a critical area. We'll need a biopsy. It's likely benign, but the symptoms are real. It's pressing on key structures, motor coordination, balance, short-term, processing. She nodded once. No emotion, no panic, but her eyes went glassy. Jonas had seen that look 1,000 times before. It was the moment someone finally realized they were not invincible. Back home that night, Lena was waiting. She was sitting cross-legged on the couch, surrounded by art supplies and scraps of notebook paper. In the center was a half-finished project. Construction paper stars and a cardboard cutout that read, "Be the reason someone believes again." Jonas dropped his keys into the bowl by the door, then leaned against the frame, watching her. How is she? Lena asked. He gave a tired smile. Stable for now. She listened this time. Lena looked up at him with quiet pride. That's because you didn't give up. He walked over and sat beside her. I think maybe she didn't want anyone to see her fall. Some people build walls so high, Lena said, they forget how to ask for a ladder. Jonas chuckled under his breath. You should write that. Down. I already did, she grinned, tapping her temple. Mental capsule. She reached for the paper again and started tracing stars with a blue marker. What's all this for? Jonas asked. It's for the school hallway. We're supposed to pick someone in our life who inspires us. And you picked me? She rolled her eyes. No, I picked Dr. Beaker, she teased, holding up her stuffed penguin. Then she leaned in. Of course I picked you, Dad. Jonas exhaled, overwhelmed by the quiet weight of her love. You know, he said there's a difference between saving someone and changing them. Lena looked at him, head tilted. Do you think she'll change? Jonas thought of Avery Blake, the woman who once sparked orders from glass towers, now lying in a hospital bed stripped of control. He thought of her whispering his name, of her trying to sit up and failing, of the way she reached for dignity even in collapse. I think he said she already has. Back at the hospital, Avery sat propped up in bed, IVs at her side, her laptop unopened on the tray. Her phone buzzed, a message from James Langley. Just saw internal memo. You okay? She didn't reply. She scrolled. Through her inbox. 42 emails marked urgent. None of them mattered. Then finally, she opened a new message. She hesitated in the to field. Then typed Jonas Hale Facilities. There was no subject line, just one sentence. Thank you for not giving up on someone who gave you every reason to. She stared at it, then hit send. Downstairs, Jonas's phone vibrated. He read the message, and for the first time in years, he let himself smile without caution. Not because it was praise, but because it was the beginning of something honest. A crack in the wall, the kind of crack where light gets in. Avery Blake hated hospital ceilings. They were always the same blank, pale, sterile tiles that seemed too far away when you were flat on your back. She'd spent the last 2 days studying the pattern above her bed, trying to decide which part she despised more, the suffocating stillness or the fact that she had no choice but to stay under it. The diagnosis had landed like a whisper through broken glass, low-grade gloma pressing near her cerebellum. Not fatal, not benign, not immediate, but waiting like a bomb with a timer no one could see. She had told no one outside the medical staff. And James. No press, no memo, no board announcement. She was still holding her crown in place, even if it now trembled in her grasp. But the one person she hadn't stopped thinking about was the janitor, Jonas Hale. The man who had seen through everything she tried to hide, who had caught her not just her body, but the weight of her fear without asking for anything in return. Avery didn't like owing people, but what she hated more was being wrong about them. Late Friday morning, Jonas arrived at the hospital not as a janitor, but as a visitor. He wasn't sure what he expected. Maybe security to stop him. Maybe Avery, to pretend she hadn't sent that message. But when he gave his name at the nurse's station, the attendant smiled and said, "She asked for you." He wasn't sure how to feel about that. He stepped into her private room and found her sitting upright, laptop open, but clearly untouched. Her hair was tied back, her features pale but proud. She looked smaller somehow, not in stature, but in armor. "You came," she said, voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "I wasn't sure I should," Jonas replied honestly. "I wasn't sure I'd want you to," she said, not unkindly. "But I kept thinking about that moment in the garage and the floor and the elevator before that and everything you saw." He nodded, stepping closer, but not sitting yet. "You said you used to be a doctor," she continued, "but there's nothing about you online. It's like you were erased." Jonas exhaled, slow and steady. "That's not far from the truth." Avery tilted her head. "Tell me." He hesitated. Then for the first time, "He did. I worked at Redwood Medical Center 15 years specializing in neurology and trauma care. I loved it until the day I reported a senior surgeon for cutting corners during post-op recovery." Her eyes sharpened. "What happened?" "He had friends in the board. I didn't. Suddenly my charts were under review. Accusations came out of nowhere. Unauthorized decisions. Inappropriate protocol. Nothing criminal, nothing true, just enough to destroy trust. They revoked your license." He nodded. "I lost everything in 6 months. My practice, my house, my wife." His voice broke just barely. Avery's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." Jonas shook his head. "Don't be. I still saved the patient, and I do it again." She studied him. This man who had once stood quietly outside her boardroom with a mop and had somehow held more integrity than anyone inside it. "You didn't have to help me," she whispered, "especially after the way I treated you." He met her eyes. "You're not the first powerful person who needed saving and didn't know it, but you might be the first who thanked me." She offered a faint smile. "I'm not great at gratitude or humility." "Well," Jonas said, "you're getting a crash course in both." That made her laugh genuinely, and for a moment her shoulders relaxed. Then came the knock. The door creaked open, and a small voice asked, "Excuse me, is this Miss Blake's room?" Avery looked up, startled. Yes, the girl who entered had long chestnut hair pulled into a side braid and bright, curious eyes. She was holding a bouquet of sunflowers too large for her arms. "I'm Lena," she said. "I'm here to bring you these. They're from the class at Horizon, elementary, and from me." Avery blinked. You're Jonas's daughter?" Lena grinned. "Yep. He's my dad, and also my hero. But don't tell him I said that. He gets weird about compliments." Jonas chuckled behind her. Betrayed by my own child, Lena walked to Avery's bedside and set the flowers down gently. "These are for strength. Sunflowers always turn toward the light, even when the world feels dark." Avery stared at her. "That's beautiful. I wrote you a card, too," Lena added. "It says, Just because someone looks strong doesn't mean they don't need kindness. Avery swallowed hard. Her fingers reached out, hesitating for a second, then took the card like it was something fragile, something holy. "Thank you, Lena." The girl shrugged like it was nothing. "You're welcome. And hey, if you ever get scared, just do what my dad does. What's that, pretend you're not scared and then do the brave thing anyway?" Jonas smiled, his chest rising with pride and awe. Avery blinked quickly and looked away, covering her eyes for a second. "Okay," Lena said, skipping back toward her dad. "I'll be in the cafe. They have cookies the size of my face." When the door closed behind her, Avery was quiet for a long beat. "Your daughter," she finally said, "might be the most extraordinary person I've ever met." "She's a better version of me," Jonas said. "She's exactly the kind of person I wish I had been at her age." Jonas sat down beside her at last. "You still can be." She looked at him, something vulnerable, almost afraid, breaking through her voice. "You think I can come back from this? Not just think," he said. "I know it, but not by pretending, not by hiding. You come back by walking into the truth and letting people walk with you." Avery let the words sink deep. Then she reached across the space between them and for the first time took his hand. "You're not just a janitor, Jonas," she said softly. "You're what medicine forgot to honor." "And you're not just a CEO," he replied. "You're someone learning how to live again." They sat in silence, sunflowers between them, Lena's voice still echoing in both their hearts. And for the first time in a long time, Avery didn't feel like she was falling apart. She felt like maybe she was just beginning. The breeze drifting through the open hospital window smelled faintly of rain and cut grass. Avery Blake stood near. The sill arms crossed a soft wool shawl draped around her shoulders. She looked down at the city below, moving, pulsing, unaware. She had once believed she was the axis of that movement. Now she wasn't sure she was even part of the map. Behind her, Jonas Hale sat quietly in the chair by the bed. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was a steady heartbeat in a room that had known too much silence. "I made the call," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonas looked up. "Dr. Green, my neurologist. He scheduled the full scan for tomorrow morning, this time with contrast, and I agreed to the biopsy if necessary." He nodded slowly, the trace of a smile in his eyes. "That's good. It's terrifying." "It should be," he said. "Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about not letting fear keep you from doing what must be done." Avery turned to face him. "I've spent my whole life controlling everything, every meeting, every forecast, every perception of me. And now?" She looked down at her hands, steady at the moment, but she knew too well how fleeting that was. "Now I can't even control what my own brain might be doing behind my back." Jonas stood and stepped closer, his tone gentle but unwavering. "You can't control the storm, but you can choose who stands beside you in the rain." She looked up at him, then really looked. "Why are you still here?" she asked. "After everything I said to you, the way I treated you." He met her eyes with something unshakable. "Because someone once gave up on me, and I know what it costs to survive that kind of silence." She blinked, something breaking softly in her chest. "You said you saved a patient that cost you everything. What happened to them?" Jonas paused, his throat tightening. "She lived," he said, "but the board didn't care. They cared that I overrode a senior surgeon who happened to be their biggest donor. I documented everything like I did for you. But instead of listening, they erased me, called me unstable, said I had personal issues clouding my judgment. Sound familiar?" Avery nodded slowly. "Too familiar. I lost my license, my income, and 2 months later, My wife. She died. Heart failure, delayed diagnosis. We couldn't afford the best hospital anymore. He didn't look away. I could save strangers, but I couldn't save her. The words landed like stones in water, quiet, deep, impossible to ignore. "I'm so sorry," Avery said. "You're not the first," Jonas replied, "but you might be the first who meant it." They stood in silence, two lives cracked by systems that rewarded power and punished truth. And in that space between them, something unspoken took root: respect, not just for survival, but for how each had learned to live in spite of it. Later, that evening, Avery's room received a new visitor. Dr. Patricia Williams, retired neurologist, 62, sharp mind, steel gray hair in a tight bun, and eyes that saw straight through pretense. She entered the room like she'd never left medicine. "I hear you've been playing cat and mouse with your own diagnosis," she said with a smirk. Avery raised a brow. "Who are you consulting second opinion unofficially?" "Courtesy of Mr. Hale here." Jonas stepped forward. "I ran into Dr. Williams a few weeks ago. She saw something in the way I helped an elderly woman who had tripped in the parking lot." "And by something," Patricia added, "I mean unmistakable medical training. You don't lose that muscle memory." Avery studied her, cautious but curious. "And why are you here now?" "Because you're about to face the biggest decision of your life," Dr. Williams said plainly, "and I believe you deserve someone who won't sugarcoat it." Avery exhaled. "All right, talk to me." Patricia pulled a tablet from her bag. "Based on what Jonas documented and your current chart, you're exhibiting signs of a low-grade gloma with potentially progressive characteristics. The tremors, the lapses in cognition, the disorientation, it's all pointing toward a critical area if we wait too long." "I know," Avery interrupted. "I collapse and don't wake up." Patricia gave a single nod. "Correct. But if we move now, we buy time, clarity, options." Jonas glanced at Avery. "You've already taken the first step. You don't have to do this alone." Avery's fingers tightened on the edge of the blanket. "I don't know how to not be alone." Patricia smiled gently. "Then, this is as good a time as any to start learning." The next morning, Avery underwent her first advanced scan since the collapse. Jonas didn't wait in the family area. He paced outside the imaging room, eyes never leaving the door. Lena called during the wait. "Hey, Bean," he answered, his voice low. "Did she go in yet?" "Just did. Is she scared?" Jonas paused. "I think she is, but she's doing it anyway." Lena's voice brightened. "Then she's brave." "Yeah," he whispered, smiling. "She is." "She'll be okay," Lena said. "I just know it. She's too stubborn to give up." Jonas laughed quietly. That might be the most accurate diagnosis yet. When the call ended, Jonas leaned against the wall, heart-thudding, not just for Avery, but for something else, something deeper. She had trusted him, really trusted him, and it felt like a beginning. Hours later, back in her room, Avery opened her eyes as the anesthesia wore off. The first thing she saw was Jonas. "Hey," he said gently, "you made it through." Her throat was dry. Her head felt like fog, but her words were clear. "You stayed." He nodded. "I wasn't going anywhere." She tried to smile, even as tears filled her eyes. "You saved me before I even believed I needed saving." Jonas took her hand, his voice quiet but fierce. "I didn't save you. You chose to fight. I just reminded you how." Avery blinked hard. "So what happens next?" He squeezed her hand. "Now we take the next step together. And for the first time in a long, long time, Avery." Blake didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she was finally rising. The news broke like glass. By mid-morning, whispers had become headlines. Blake Corp, CEO, hospitalized for neurological. Conditions spread across news feeds, investor threads, and anonymous forums. The carefully guarded door Avery had closed behind her illness had been kicked wide open. Inside the boardroom on the 48th floor, 12 men and women in suits as sharp as scalpels sat around the long obsidian table. The skyline glimmered behind them, but the air in the room was cold, clinical. "She's compromised," said Mark Callahan, CFO and the unofficial leader of the corporate vultures. "We cannot ignore the liability. She is still our CEO," countered Lillian Cho, VP of Ethics. "Until there's due process." "Due process," Mark snorted. "She collapsed in the company garage, had to be carried out by a janitor. And now the same janitor is on video performing some kind of medical intervention. This is spiraling." They all turned as the glass door opened. Avery walked in. No power heels today, just flats. Her pace was steady posture tall, but her pour was undeniable. Jonas followed a few steps behind her, not as a janitor today, but as someone she'd brought in deliberately. Gasps were subtle, but there. "Good morning," she said, voice calm, crisp. "I see the sharks are circling faster than usual." Mark leaned forward, lips tight. "You should be resting." "I will after I address the vultures," she replied without blinking. "Now, let's discuss what you're really after. The board has concerns. You mean you do?" Avery cut in. "Let's not pretend this is about fiduciary duty. It's about control and about this man," another board member said, nodding toward Jonas. "What's he doing here?" Avery turned toward Jonas. Jonas Hale is a former board-certified neurosurgeon. He recognized symptoms that our in-house team missed. He intervened when others ignored, and thanks to him, I'm alive. "You're admitting the janitor gave you medical advice?" Mark said, his voice spiked with mockery. "I'm saying he noticed what none of you did because he wasn't trying to protect his reputation or stock options." She stepped closer. "I ignored him at first, like I ignored my own body. That was my mistake. But you want to use my illness as a weapon." Mark's voice darkened. "If the public perceives instability at the top, the company suffers." Avery's jaw tensed. The public isn't the problem. It's the silence. The silence that allows sickness of the body of the system to fester. Jonas stood in that silence. "You mocked him, called him a delusional janitor." "Because he is a janitor," Mark snapped. Avery's eyes blazed. "No, he scrubs floors because your world wouldn't let him scrub into an O. He's a doctor who never stopped caring, even when the system buried him." There was a pause, then a voice from the door. "Maybe the public should decide who the hero really is." It was Simone Albright, director of PR, holding up her phone. She tapped play. The boardroom filled with a grainy video captured on a security camera. Avery, unconscious, seizing in the garage. Jonas rushing in, calm and precise, rolling. Her gently supporting her airway, applying pressure at the exact nerve point to break the seizure cycle. A woman's voice in the background gasped. "Is he a doctor?" The clip cut. Silence fell again, but this time it was reverent. "I leaked it," Simone admitted, "because the world deserves to see what it looks like when someone does the right thing, even when no one's watching." Mark looked livid. "You leaked security footage?" "No," said Avery quietly. "I did." All eyes turned. "I'm not hiding anymore," she said. "Not my condition, not the truth. If you want to vote me out, do it. But I won't let cowardice make that decision for me." Jonas stepped forward, clearing his throat. "I didn't ask for this attention," he said, his voice steady. "And I don't want anything from your company. But I will say this. If doing the right thing is grounds for termination, then maybe you're not the board Blake Corp needs." No one spoke. Avery gave them one last look, then turned to walk out. Jonas followed. Just before the door closed, Lillian Cho's voice rang out. "Motion to delay any vote until post-top clearance." Mark sputtered. "That's not seconded," came two other voices. The gavel of order had been struck not by fear, but by the ripple of truth. That afternoon, the video hit national news. Headlines flared. CEO saved by janitor? Or was he something more? Courage wears work boots. The man behind the moment. Second chances and second opinions online. Thousands began resharing the clip. On a storytelling podcast, a voiceover played in a world where credentials matter more than character. One man defied both with nothing but instinct, integrity, and a mop in his hand. Meanwhile, Jonas sat with Lena at home. She held the tablet, eyes wide. "Dad, you're trending." He smiled faintly. For now, she tilted her head. "Are you okay with that?" He leaned back in the chair. "I didn't do it to be seen, but maybe. It's not bad that people saw what mattered." Lena looked down at her notebook, the one she was filling with reasons her dad was a hero. She underlined something she had written days ago. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear name tags. Jonas ruffled her hair, voice low. "Tomorrow's going to be even louder." "I know," Lena said, "but we've been quiet long enough." And in that moment, Jonas realized this wasn't just about Avery anymore. It was about what the truth could heal. The early morning light stretched lazily through the curtains, casting golden stripes across the hardwood floor of the Hale apartment. It was Saturday, the kind of quiet morning made for pancakes and pajamas. But Lena Hale was already dressed, in her favorite overalls and a too-big hoodie she'd borrowed from Jonas weeks ago. She stood at the kitchen counter, tongue slightly out in concentration as she scribbled on a yellow notepad. Jonas leaned in from the hallway, rubbing his eyes. "You're up early, Bean. I have work to do," she said without looking up. He stepped closer. "Work?" Lena held up the notepad with both hands, proud. "It's my list." Jonas took it gently, reading the title at the top in block letters. "How to help Avery get better and smile more." He blinked, lips twitching. "That's a long title. She deserves a long list," Lena said matter-of-factly. "She saved your job and she's sick. That's double points." He sat beside her at the counter, reading the list. 1, make her laugh. Tickle backup plan if needed. 2, bring her that strawberry tea from the farmer's market. 3, draw her a note tumors allowed sign for her room. 4, tell her she's still the boss even when she's scared. 5, make a secret handshake. Include pinky promise. Part 6, remind her she's not alone. Jonas paused at the last one. "She won't forget," Lena said softly. "What alone feels like." He looked at her then, not as a kid, but as someone who had watched more than her share of hard days, someone who had learned what love meant by noticing the quiet places where it disappeared. "You know," he said, "that list might be the best medicine she gets." Lena smiled. "It's not done yet." Later that morning, they visited the hospital. Jonas brought Avery her favorite tea. Lena brought the list, decorated now with doodles of swords' hearts and a tiny brain-wearing sunglasses. Avery was propped up in bed, hair pulled into a loose braid, eyes tired but alert. "I hear I'm being prescribed humor and strawberries," she said dryly as they walked in. Lena skipped to her side and laid the list on the tray. Avery scanned the page, brow lifting. I-3 is a sign that says no tumors allowed. Strict policy. Lena nodded solemnly. Avery chuckled a real warm sound. Then her fingers moved toward Lena's and squeezed gently. "You are ridiculously wonderful." Lena shrugged. "Takes one to know one." When Jonas and Lena stepped into the hallway to give Avery a moment with Dr. Williams, the elevator dinged behind them. To Jonas's surprise, his old supervisor from St. Catherine's, Dr. Niall Harper, stepped out. They locked eyes. Harper froze, then approached with cautious steps. "Hail." Jonas gave a polite nod. "Dr. Harper." Harper cleared his throat. "I saw the video. Most people have." "Didn't expect it'd be you," Harper admitted. "The hands. I recognize them. You used to steady your scalpel the same way." Jonas said nothing. "I was wrong about you," Harper said after a beat. We all were. The system, it doesn't, like gray areas. Jonas tilted his head. Or people who step into them. Harper looked toward Avery's room. She's lucky to have you in her corner. Jonas let out a quiet breath. I'm lucky she let me stay. Back inside. Avery's room was quiet again. Lena sat cross-legged, on the couch coloring a card that read, CEO equals coolest ever official. Jonas stood by the window watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. Avery spoke, voice soft. Your daughter is something else. He nodded. She sees more than most adults ever do. Avery looked down at the list again, tracing the pinky promise part. I don't remember the last time anyone made something like this for me. She makes one every time I'm sick. Once I had a cold, and she taped cough drops to a chart titled Mission Unstuffy Nose. Avery laughed, then stilled. She asked me once if I remembered what it felt like to be a kid. She said, I didn't know how to answer. Jonas turned to her. Maybe this is your second chance. She looked at him, truly looked. Do you believe in those? He crossed the room, slowly pulled a chair close. I think second chances don't knock, they whisper. They wait, and sometimes they show up in the form of a little girl with crayons and a mission. Avery's eyes welled. This thing inside me, she said quietly. It's changed everything I know, but it's also changed me. Jonas leaned in. Then maybe it didn't come to end your story. Maybe it came to rewrite it. She nodded slowly, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. And what about your story? She asked. Do you ever wonder what life would have looked like if they hadn't taken everything from you? He paused, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. Lena's. She had slipped it in there earlier that morning. He opened it and read the most recent entry aloud. Heroes aren't always the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who stay after everyone else walks away. He looked up at Avery. I don't wonder, he said. Not anymore. She reached out her hand. He took it. Not as patient and caregiver, not as CEO and janitor, but as two people scarred, surviving, and finally beginning to heal. That night, Avery sent a voice memo to Lena. Dear Bean, she began. Today, your list made me laugh, cry, and feel braver than I have in weeks. You might just be the best secret weapon a girl could ask for. Also, I think the secret handshake needs glitter. Don't tell your dad. Lena replayed it 3 times, and in her notebook beneath the last item on the list, she added one more number 7. Remind her she's loved every single day. And in the quiet, as her dad hummed a lullaby in the other room, Lena smiled. Mission healing in progress. The operating room glowed with sterile white light. Machines beeped rhythmically, too calm for what was at stake. Avery lay on the table, eyes closed, lashes dark against pale skin like a general before battle. Elegant, fierce, and human. Dr. Patricia Williams stood at the helm, reviewing the latest scans on the digital display. The gloma was subtle, nestled, close to the motor cortex, like a secret, waiting to steal her from herself. Timing was everything. She's young, sharp, one of the younger neurosurgeons whispered. She'll come through this. Patricia didn't look up. She's also exhausted, terrified, and carrying more weight than any one human should. Let's focus on what we can control. Outside, rain tapped against the surgical wing's windows, soft like a prayer. But Jonas wasn't there to hear it. He was 2, miles away at a community health center that smelled faintly of bleach and yesterday's coffee. Room 3, a nurse shouted. 72-year-old female, possible stroke GCS dropping. Jonas was already moving. He slid into the room like instinct had carried him there. The woman's face drooped on one side, speech slurred. Her daughter stood near the wall, weeping silently. Jonas didn't hesitate. "Ma'am, can you squeeze my hand?" The woman groaned faintly. "She's having a left-side occlusion," Jonas said, already adjusting her position. "We need TPA within the golden window." "But we don't have a neuroconsult," the nurse said, panicked. "You do now," Jonas said. "Get me her blood panel and CT. I'll document everything." He didn't sign the chart with Dr. Jonas Hale. He just signed it. And he didn't look at his phone, not even once. Back in the surgical wing, Avery was drifting somewhere between sedation and memory. Her mind floated through echoes of things unsaid, her father's voice the night he died. Jonas's eyes the first time he stood up to her, Lena's laughter under the magnolia tree. Then nothing, a blank space, then light. Lena sat beside a window at the hospital cafe, clutching a small notebook with her name on the cover. 10 pages, 10 lessons from her dad. She reread them slowly, one by one. 1. Courage is being scared and still showing up. 4. When you see something wrong, say something even if they don't believe you. 7. Being kind is braver than being right. She flipped to the last one. 10. You don't have to be called a hero to be one. She closed the book, eyes shimmering, and whispered, "You'd be proud of her, Dad. She's trying." Hours passed. The surgery was long, delicate, threading needles through the mind's most sacred spaces. There were moments when the line between success and catastrophe blurred like mist on glass. But Patricia never wavered, and when the final suture was placed, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "It's done," she said, quietly. "She's going to make it." A nurse smiled. "Should we call Mr. Hale?" Patricia looked at the empty seat in the waiting area and shook her head gently. "No, he already knows." That evening, Avery awoke in a quiet room, dimly lit, the sound of monitors clicking softly beside her. Her mouth was dry, her body heavy, but her mind was clear. She blinked slowly, adjusting to the light, then turned her head toward the empty chair beside her bed. No Jonas. Instead, a folded piece of paper rested on the pillow. With effort, she reached for it, her fingers trembling more from emotion than weakness. It was his handwriting. "Avery, you probably expected me to be there when you woke up. I wanted to be, but someone else needed me today. A woman no one saw until it was almost too late. You've got a dozen people looking after you. She had no one. I didn't do this for credit or redemption or applause. I did it because I knew you'd fight, and you did. You didn't need saving. You just needed space to choose. I'm proud of you. Not because you survived the surgery, but because you let yourself be human. Be well, Avery. Jay." A tear slipped down her cheek. She had always thought strength was about standing alone, proving everyone wrong. Now she saw it for what it truly was, letting someone believe in you when you couldn't, and believing them back. The next morning, Patricia entered the room with a tired smile. "You look like you've just read a love letter," she quipped. Avery gave a weak laugh. "Maybe I did." Patricia pulled up the chart. Clear margins. No vascular disruption. "You're one of the lucky ones." "Not luck," Avery said quietly. "Someone fought for me when I wouldn't have." Patricia closed the file, her tone softening. Sometimes healing doesn't start on the table. It starts when you finally let someone stay. Avery looked out the window. Sunlight cut through the clouds, like a promise. I think it started the night a janitor noticed what no one else did. Patricia nodded. "You going to tell the world?" Avery smiled. "No, I'm going to show them." That evening at the community health center, Jonas washed his hands in the tiny back sink. The emergency had passed. The woman stabilized. He stepped outside to breathe. And there she was, Lena, sitting on the bench under the dim streetlight. Legs swinging. "You weren't at the hospital," she said. He nodded. She had a team. This woman had no one. Lena tilted her head. You think Avery knows? I think she understands, he replied. Lena hopped off the bench and took his hand. Can we get burgers on the way home? Jonas smiled. You read my mind, Bean. As they walked toward the truck, Lena glanced up. You think she'll be okay? Jonas didn't answer right away, but then he said quietly, She already is. And in that simple truth, no headlines, no medals, lived the soul of a man who never stopped being who he promised he'd be. 6 weeks later, the Blake Corp building looked different, not in structure but in spirit. The marble floors still gleamed, the glass walls still shimmered, but the air had shifted. Something unspoken had passed through the halls like the last breath of a storm that left behind cleaner skies. Jonas Hale stood in the lobby, not in his janitor's uniform, but in a crisp button-down and a worn leather satchel hanging from one shoulder. Lena clung to his hand, her other arm holding a folder filled with brochures and loose papers about the Hale Community Health Center. The name still embarrassed him. Avery had insisted. I wanted to call it the Quiet Hero Clinic, she told him, with a smirk. He had just shaken his head. I'd rather mop floors again. They stepped into the elevator, the same one where everything began. Do you think she's nervous? Lena asked, tugging on his sleeve. Jonas smiled. She's giving away the company she built from scratch. I'd be nervous. She's not giving it away, Lena corrected. She's giving it back to people who care. He looked down at her, amazed by how a 10-year-old could say things that made more sense than entire boardrooms. On the top floor, sunlight poured through the full-length windows of the executive conference room. But this time there was no board meeting, no cold stares or quarterly projections, just a few trusted faces, and Avery standing at the head of the table, not in heels and a power's suit, but in a simple dress hair soft at her shoulders, eyes clear from surgery and solitude. She took a breath. I'm stepping down as CEO of Blake Corp, effective today, she said calmly. This company deserves a leader who sees not just the future of medicine, but the people it's meant to serve. Murmurs rippled through the room. She raised a hand gently. I was given a second chance, one that came not from our labs or AI or data, but from someone the world called a janitor. Her voice didn't waver. I'm here because he noticed what no one else did. And he didn't do it for praise or legacy. He did it because it was right. She turned and looked at Jonas, who stood silently near the door. Our company talks about innovation, but the most radical act in medicine is compassion. That's what I forgot. That's what he reminded me. And with that, she handed the company's symbolic keycard to her newly appointed successor, a woman from the nonprofit arm of Blake Corp, known for running community outreach with empathy and precision. The room applauded. Jonas didn't move until Lena tugged his arm again. Dad, she whispered, she's looking at you like Mom used to. He turned. Avery was in fact looking right at him, not with the icy steel of their first encounters, nor the awkward gratitude after the surgery, but with something softer, fuller, real. Later that afternoon, in a small press conference streamed to a modest online audience, Avery introduced the Hale Foundation, a scholarship and training initiative to fund emergency response and preventative medicine programs for low-income workers, janitors, cafeteria staff, drivers, and night shift caregivers. The people who hold the world up when no one's watching, she said. A journalist raised a hand. Ms. Blake, is Dr. Jonas Hale involved? She smiled. He doesn't like titles. Then what does he do for the foundation? She paused. He leads it by example. Jonas, watching from a side door with Lena on his shoulders, chuckled quietly. Still not comfortable with that, he muttered. Get used to it, Lena whispered. You're trending, he groaned. That evening they sat on a park bench, Jonas, Avery, and Lena. No cameras, no speeches, just a quiet breeze carrying the scent of grass and something fried from a food truck nearby. Lena sat cross-legged on the grass, teaching herself how to whistle with 2 fingers. Avery held a paper tray of fries between them. "Truffle oil," she said, offering him one. "Don't say I never spoiled you." He took one without a word, chewing thoughtfully. "Still think garlic salt's better?" She laughed. "You're impossible." There was a long pause, not heavy, just full. Avery spoke first. "Do you ever wonder how close we came to never speaking?" Jonas looked out at the pond where a family of ducks was gliding across the water in a neat line. Every day she leaned back. "Do you ever think it would have been easier if I'd just taken your warning seriously from the start?" Jonas shook his head. "No, you weren't ready. People don't listen until they've lost something or almost lost it." Avery studied him for a long moment. "What did you lose?" He exhaled. "My license, my wife, my name, and what did you gain?" He looked at Lena. "Her." Then he turned to Avery. "And you?" She blinked slowly. "Jonas, but he raised a hand. "You don't have to say anything." Avery nodded. Then quietly she said, "Sometimes what saves us isn't medicine. It's being seen." He turned to face her. "I saw you the first day," he said. "Not the CEO, the woman hiding in the suit of armor." "And I saw you," she replied, voice steady. "After I took mine off, their hands didn't touch. But something passed between them and understanding, like a promise that didn't need words. The sky faded into a soft indigo. Street lamps flickered on. Lena ran up breathless and triumphant. "I almost got the whistle," she said. "Want to hear Jonas grinned? Always." She blew hard, producing a short, squeaky note. They all laughed. Avery handed Lena another fry. Jonas stood, stretching his back, and offered a hand to both of them. "Come on," he said. "Let's go home." They walked together, three silhouettes, under the golden glow of city lights, quiet, steady, whole. And though no one called them a family, they already were. Sometimes what saves us isn't medicine. It's being seen. And maybe that's the quiet miracle in stories like this. Sometimes the hero doesn't wear a white coat or stand behind a podium. Sometimes he just carries a mop and chooses to see what others don't. What about you? Have you ever met someone who changed your life when no one else noticed? Or maybe are you that someone? Let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story wherever in the world you are. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel for more powerful human stories just like this one. Your support helps these stories reach someone who might need them the most. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave, and remember, even the quietest voice can save a